Live. Okay. It is 6:59. You're right. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock here in the northeast of the United States, and this is the Tibet Center, Kunchab Tarduling, a Buddhist meditation and study center located in New York City and northern New Jersey. And this is our twice weekly presentation of the Buddha Dharma, specifically stages on the path to enlightenment, the Lamrim Chenmo of J. Sankapa. If there's any person for whom you want us to pray for who has passed away recently, place their names in the chat box and others will see it. All the prayers we say are on the website in the FAQ section. Scroll down to prayers. Any problems with the sound or picture, etc., and so forth, text me or Mr. Darren Smith. So we'll start with prayer for the spread of the teachings throughout the length and breadth of the West. By the force of the blessing of the non-fallations, three precious gems, and of the truth of our pure selfless wishes, may the precious Buddhist teaching flourish and spread to the expanse of all areas throughout the length and breadth of the West. For all the people living here, together with their near ones, who have engaged in the teachings and have faith and respect for them, may all conditions adverse to their practice of the pure Dharma be dispelled, and an excellent collection of favorable conditions increase like the waxing moon. And especially for those who work on methods to accomplish the flourishing and spreading of the victorious one's teachings, which are the source of benefit and happiness, may they never be oppressed by masses of interference and adverse conditions, and may this spontaneously happen just as we have hoped and wished. The Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of the Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a big gathering of great monks and great bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi which examines the dharmas called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, how should those noble ones learn who wish to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge? And Avalokiteshvara answered, Venerable Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this. Seeing the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Form is empty. Emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is not separate from form. Form is not separate from emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discriminating awareness, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Thus, all the dharmas are empty and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discriminating awareness, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no objects of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of hearing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There are no nidanas from ignorance to old age and death, nor their wearing out. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge. And since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. They transcend falsity and pass beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future by means of transcendent knowledge, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering, should be known as truth, for there is no deception in transcendent knowledge. The mantra is proclaimed, Tayata Om Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha. Well, Shariputra, this is how a bodhisattva, mahasattva, should learn profound transcendent knowledge. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised the bodhisattva, mahasattva, Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, profound, transcendent knowledge should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, that whole gathering in the world with its gods, humans, Asuras and Gandharvas, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One. And now, refuge and bodhisattva vow, which, as you know, we say 3 times. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. So tonight we have a variety of things. First of all, we'll be presenting the modern Lamrim, written by His Holiness Dalai Lama in cooperation with Venerable Thupten Chodron. This is still the first volume of a soon-to-be 10-volume series. 9 of them are already out. The theory behind this is that the Lamrim, written in its day, was aimed at students who already were fully immersed in Buddhism, fully immersed in the culture that Buddhism engendered. So they didn't need a lot of the material that we need now. And we get confused because the references there are not the way we understand certain concepts, and many other reasons. I put some of them out before. So I'm skipping a little. I'm going to page 39 of this Approaching the Buddhist Path, the first volume, where they laid out that reason for writing this text, etc., and how they'll proceed. This is a chapter called Mind and Emotions. It's very, very useful. Pay attention not only to the way the information being given, but the way they parse things, the way they examine things, the way they categorize things nicely so you can work with them. Emotions right away, no, it's a science. And this is Buddhist science in its finest hour. So His Holiness starts, we are all emotional beings. Our feelings of pleasure or pain provoke different emotions, and our emotions motivate us to act. Some of our emotions are afflictive and unrealistic. Others are more realistic and beneficial. As a result, some of our actions bring more pain, while others bring happiness. Learning to differentiate destructive from constructive emotions so that we can subdue the former and nourish the latter is a worthy endeavor on a personal as well as a societal level. You want to change society, you must change people's minds and attitudes. No other way. You can't bomb people into a better society. I don't think so. It's being tried constantly. It never works. He continues, Buddhas have eliminated all afflictive emotions, but that does not mean that they are emotionally flat, apathetic, and unreceptive to human contact. In fact, it's the opposite. By going through the gradual process of overcoming destructive emotions, such as greed and anger, Buddhas have built up and expanded constructive emotions such as love and compassion. Due to this inner transformation, their work in the world is wiser and more effective. In this chapter, you'll be introduced to the Buddhist view of emotions, comparing and contrasting that view with Western paradigms. We'll also examine how specific emotions affect our daily life and how to work with difficult emotions and cultivate positive ones. So Buddhism, Science, and the Emotions is the subheading of this section now. Buddhists and scientists have some similar and some very different ideas about emotions. In general, scientists describe an emotion as having three components. You have to reflect on this. Psychological component, obvious. Experiential component, and a behavioral component. Now we'll explain those three. The physiological component of an emotion. The physiological component includes the chemical and electrical changes in the brain, as well as galvanic skin response, heart rate, and other changes in the body. You're mad, your heart goes up, the skin is hot, blah, blah, blah. Understood. The experiential component is the subjective experience, the psychological mood or feeling aspect of an emotion. You're angry, what is your mood? Very easy, but see how it's broken down so you can work with it. The behavioral aspect includes the words and actions of a person motivated by that emotion. Now, the Buddhists look at it a little different. From the Buddhist perspective, emotions are mental states and subjective experiences. They're mental states and subjective experiences, how you feel. They may be accompanied by changes in the body's physiology, but the brain's activities are not the emotion itself. For example, if we could put some live brain cells in a petri dish in front of us, we would not say that their chemical and electrical interactions were anger or affection, because anger and affection are internal mental experiences of a living being. They have correlates in the brain, but they're internal experience of a living being. This experience may be correlated with activity in a certain area of the brain, but that neurological activity is not the experience of anger. Similarly, an emotion may lead to an action, but that action is an effect of the emotion, not the emotion itself. See how they're breaking everything? We just pile it all in. And of course, it's overwhelming. Looking at it this way, in a calm manner, this way when they occur, you know what's going on, you can work with them. Consequently, the three components mentioned above, Buddhism speaks of emotions only in terms of the second, what we experience, feel, and think. That's all. You're not interested in your skin response or anything else. Buddhism does not deny that the mind and body affect and influence each other. When our knee hits the table, our mind experiences pain, and our mouth says something, experiences pain, and we may become irritated, or you do become irritated. When our mind is calm, our physical health improves. In Commentary on Reliable Cognition, this is very good insight here. Dharmakirti says that when the body is healthy, attachment to sexual pleasure increases in the mind, whereas when the body is weak, anger increases more easily. You're getting sick, you get everything annoys you, you get angry at everything. Sometimes it's an indicator that you better sit back. Sometimes. He continues, Buddhism does not deny that the mind and body affect, we have said this, on a subtler level. Certain emotions correlate with specific chemical and electrical changes in the brain. Does this correlation indicate a cause and effect relationship? Very precise thinking here. Science has made fascinating discoveries correlating certain cognitive and emotional states with specific areas in the brain and particular neuron activity, but we must be careful not to attribute causality when there is merely correlation. They've noticed that when experienced meditators are told meditate on compassion, certain areas of the brain light up that are the motor areas. In other words, the part of the brain that lights up when you're going to do something. Sounds strange, doesn't it? Compassion is an active thing. When they meditate on compassion, they want to remove suffering. That's what they found out. That's Dr. Davidson, University of Wisconsin. Very interesting scientist from Brooklyn, of course. Some scientists believe that since physiological events in the brain cause the emotion, Buddhists think that in general, the mental states precede the physiological changes. In other words, the mind is there first, then these things occur. It'd be interesting as they can do experiments on this. It's not hard. So something to look into. This is an important area open for research, and in recent years, many sciences have begun to explore it. But regardless of whether the subtle changes in the brain cause or are caused by or simply correlate with emotions, Buddhism emphasizes that emotions and feelings are mental states in living beings, period. Figure it that way, and you can work with them. Without mind, there's no experience. A corpse certainly doesn't have love or hatred, and a group of neurons or a cluster of genes does not feel pleasure or pain. Living beings do. Feelings, emotions, thoughts, views, attitudes, and so forth occur in the mind. They are mental states experienced by living beings. Now, it's an important paragraph here on page 41. These mental states motivate our physical and verbal actions. Yes. You're annoyed, you do something, you're happy, you got it. It is unreasonable and even dangerous to say, my biological makeup makes me harm others. The devil made me do it. We heard that one too. Such an attitude leads us down the slippery slope of abdicating responsibilities for our actions by attributing their causes to physical elements over which we have no control. It's not my fault. In addition to creating a sense of powerlessness in us, it could be used to justify eliminating individuals with certain genetic or neurological makeups. He's thinking ahead to the dictatorial models that, for instance, in World War II, they wanted to get rid of certain people in Nazi Germany. He continues, the vast majority of our physical and verbal actions are prompted by intentions in our minds. This you can prove yourself. And these intentions are influenced by our feelings, emotions, and views. Step back for a second and see how you go about life, and you intend something, and these intentions are influenced by our feelings, our emotions, our viewpoints, whether they're legit or not. Although many of our intentions are very subtle and seem more like primal urges than conceived plans. This is a big point here, because primal, I'll let the sentence finish, they are present nonetheless. These things, these instincts, primal urges, look at them carefully. They're a result of causes and conditions. They're a result of certain thinkings that conditioned our minds to operate that way. They are not a stone wall that can't be corrected. The fact that our intention and emotions are the forces behind what we say and do means that by changing them, we can transform our actions in our lives. Changing your intentions. Another word for intention, by the way, is karma. We are not doomed to a life circumscribed by the limitations of our genes, neural pathways, and biological processes over which we have very little choice or control. While we still have to deal with the effects of genetic and physiological processes, we need not develop a defeatist attitude regarding them. I'm born with this or that, no. And as we've seen in a lot of these modern experiments, the brain is very plastic. IQ is not a set number. It can be improved with techniques. And that's what Buddhism is now bringing to the table in the 21st century. It's a big gift to the world. We have human intelligence and the seeds of love, compassion, wisdom, and other magnificent qualities inside us. We have Buddha nature in its nutshell. These can be consciously developed, and many great sages in a variety of cultures and spiritual traditions have done this. It's not just Buddhists. We've seen this in other traditions, mystical traditions here and there. Many years ago, I challenged one of the science in our mind and life dialogues to research the effects of cultivating well-being and positive emotions on the brain. After investigating for some years, he reported that due to a combination of the brain's neuroplasticity and people's meditation practice, there were changes in the brain circuits of people who cultivated 4 selective qualities. This is straight science. 1, resilience, positive outlook, attention, and generosity. Each of these has corresponding Buddhist practices to develop them. Resilience is the speed with which we recover from adversity. A positive outlook is seeing the basic goodness in others and letting that influence all that we do. Attention is the ability to focus on an object and enables us to complete what we begin. Very interesting. The more you pay attention, you can complete what you begin. A lot of our things you give up, but you're not paying attention. You're not into it. You're not mindful of what you're doing. That carries with it a nice energy that helps you, even in general life, not just sitting on the cushion and meditate. And generosity is an attitude of giving and sharing. Oh, that we know. We know. Don't tell us. All of these activate brain circuits that are correlated with a sense of well-being. The researchers' conclusions was that well-being can be learned. This feeling of eudaimonia, they call it, I can't pronounce it right, it's a Greek word, general feeling of well-being can be learned. So they've been developing programs that teach meditation and mindfulness and using them in schools, hospitals, and so forth with great success. Some of it is in the Canadian school system from K to 12. The secular ethics program, it's a compassion in action, et cetera, and so forth. Pardon me for one moment. It's cold brew. Keeps me going. Anyway, happiness and unhappiness, virtue and non-virtue, the heading of this section. Happiness and unhappiness, virtue and non-virtue. Easy to understand. While both Buddhism and psychology seek to help people have more happiness and fulfillment and decrease their unhappiness and misery, they differ somewhat in what they consider positive and negative emotions. Some psychologists and scientists I have spoken with say that a negative emotion is one that feels bad and makes the person unhappy at the time it is manifest in the mind. A positive emotion makes the person feel happy at the time it is manifest. Now, he has a counter to that. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, we would, agree with this in general, but let's see what he says, His Holiness says. In Buddhism, what differentiates positive and negative emotion is not our immediate feeling of happiness or discomfort, but the happiness or suffering that is the long-term result of these emotions. Let him break it out. Let's see. That is because the long-term effects of our actions are considered more important than their short-term effects, which tend to be fleeting in comparison. Whatever you do imprints the mind. You may have, if it's a negative action, that seed is there, will create a negative experience in the future, even if at the present time you felt real good. So, if in the long run an emotion produces unpleasant experiences, it is considered negative. If it brings happiness in the long term, it is positive. Buddhism explains that virtuous, positive, constructive, and wholesome emotions lead to happiness in the long term, while non-virtuous, negative, destruction, unwholesome emotions lead to suffering. He'll give you a few examples. The Buddha presented 4 scenarios in which present happiness / pain and virtue, non-virtue are at play. It presents happiness, pain, virtue, non-virtue, etc. This is the Majjhima Nikaya, a Pali text. He goes all over the Buddhist canon to make his point. Here, this is Buddha speaking in the Pali canon. Here, when someone feels a certain kind of pleasant feeling, non-virtuous states increase in him and virtuous states diminish. But when someone feels another kind of pleasant feeling, non-virtuous states diminish in him and virtuous states increase. So it's not just a pleasant feeling, that's the criteria. Here, when someone feels a certain kind of painful feeling, non-virtuous states increase in him and virtuous states diminish. But when someone feels another kind of painful feeling, non-virtuous states diminish in him and virtuous states increase. That's the Buddha speaking. It's a male pronoun in those days. That's what they did, usually talking to monks. So, the explanation. This thought-provoking citation is worthy of some illustration. Yes, what is he talking about? Let's flesh it out a little. As it says, there are 4 possible permutations of feeling and ethical value. In the first, a pleasant feeling accompanies the increase of non-virtue and decrease of virtue. And what's that? What does that mean? An example is feeling happy when we successfully deceive others about a vile action we have committed. Even though it may be accompanied by a pleasant feeling, our action is not virtuous, and since it is the cause of future suffering. We stole something, made a lot of money in the short term. Wow. That's going to be a karmic debt we have to pay. So happiness in the present, suffering in the long run. In the second, there's a pleasant feeling when a non-virtuous state decreases and a virtuous one increases. What kind of that is? What's that? An example is taking delight in making a generous offering to a charity that helps refugees or the poor and hungry. This kind of happiness is win-win. We feel joyful now, and our action creates the cause for future happiness for self and others. So that's a win-win. Okay? Another example. The third occurs when an unpleasant feeling accompanies an increase in non-virtue and a decrease in virtue. An example is the pain of someone who angrily rejects being sentenced to prison after being convicted of embezzlement. You did it. Take your medicine. Not taking responsibility, His Holiness goes on, for his non-virtuous action, he angrily blames others, creating more non-virtue. If he accepted responsibility for his action and regretted it, his virtue would increase, and his pain would lead him to change his ways. The fourth situation, we have a painful feeling, but our non-virtue diminishes and our virtue increases. What kind of example is that? Let's see. An example is taking a lower paying job to avoid having to lie to clients or customers. I've known people who have done this right in our center. In this case, creating virtue that will bring happiness in the future and peace of mind right now also brings some unhappiness of a loss in income, but it is undoubtedly worthwhile in the long run. I remember my wife giving me a very nice job to take a contract temp job so she could take care of her mother whenever she had to. That was a loss of income, but immense merit taking care of your parents. So His Holiness goes on, page 43, the end of this little section. Making some examples of these from your own experience is useful. Think of it, things you've done, negative and positive, in your own theater of the mind. You know, nobody's listening, nobody's there. There's no audience, no press, nothing, just you. And if you're sincere with yourself, you'll learn a lot. It's a big point in Buddhism. You have to be internally sincere. Sometimes yeah. Our PR department kicks in and tells us, that's what you're all right. Be sincere. No. Making some examples of these from your own experience is useful. Such an exercise helps us to value our ethical integrity more than fleeting happiness of getting what we want at the moment. Ethical integrity. I think that's not around anymore. I don't see much of it. Since our self-esteem and feelings of self-worth depend more on our ethical integrity than on sensual pleasure, it is worthwhile to take the time to remind ourselves of these values before an impulse arises, so that when the time comes, we will make wise decisions. There's another big point in meditation. Some of these techniques, for instance, you read Shantadeva's book, the 6th chapter about how to avoid angers, they are not immediate first aid antidotes. When you're screaming mad, the anger incident has arisen, flaming out of control. Oh, yeah, well, I should think this and that. It's not going to work. These are like vaccines. When you have time, you accustom yourselves to these ideas. Slowly, the mind will change. So when these incidents occur, you'll see that, oh, in the past, I would have really blown my top. Now it's just a minor annoyance. I don't like it, but I'm not freaking out. I'm not going out of control and making things worse. That's an indication that these practices are working. All these meditations, they are like vaccines. It's the only way I can think of it. You have the flu, you take a vaccine shot, it's not going to get rid of the flu. It's too late. You have the flu. You have to develop an immunity to these things. And this is what we're doing. We're developing immunity to the annoyances of life, to the things that would cause us to make ourselves even more miserable. You got it? So the time will make wise decisions. Now, he has some reflections, which will take like 2 seconds on each. We won't take 100 years or whatever. These are little meditations you could do. Analytical, hardly even a meditation, just a consideration. Let's call it that. Number 1, when you act against your ethical values, how do you feel at the moment of doing the action? How do you feel later when reflecting on your action? Think about that. How do you feel when you go against your ethical values? How do you feel at the moment of doing the action? How do you feel later when reflecting on your action? Something to think about when you have time, you're waiting for the bus or whatever. Second little reflection that he recommends. When you give up an immediate pleasure due to your sense of personal integrity or for the sake of long-term happiness, how do you feel at the time? How do you feel later when reflecting on your action? This is good training because you're starting to cut little pathways in the mind, and systems in the mind are being brought up so that you start looking at your actions this way. We don't care what religion you are. Any religion can do this. This has no idea. I'm not talking about the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, or the next life. Simple behavior patterns that you develop in your mind, mental behavior patterns. Finally, the third one, how integral is ethical conduct to your happiness? Only you know. Based on what you conclude here, make some determinations about how you want to live. So this is life science, 101, or whatever, 102. Yeah, that's how we use Buddhism and how we think analytically. There's no mention here of any sort of faith thing or whatever, just practical advice that anyone could apply. Emotions and klesas. Let's see, we have time. I'll do a little more of this because these are the things that make our lives miserable. If we can control our emotions and our reactions to certain things that are really wrong, it helps us. Emotions and klesas. Before going deeper with the discussions of emotion, we need to clarify terms. What's a klesa? We'll find out. Although everyone in the West understands the meaning of the word emotion, there is not a parallel word in Tibetan. This is a big hang-up. It's a little wordy here, but just to give you a framework. When Chodron, this is the Venerable Chodron who's doing the writing on this section, was reviewing this chapter with His Holiness, he and his translators engaged in a lengthy discussion about the meaning of emotion and how it could be translated into Tibetan. Some Tibetans suggest the Tibetan word nyungcho as a translation, although this word is not widely used. Etymologically, nyung means experience and cho means feeling. Both of these qualities pertain to other mental states that are not emotions. That's out. That didn't make the cut. Other Tibetans have proposed the word jurbag, found in Jalsap Rinpoche's commentary to Dhammakirti's commentary of 11. That's years ago. However, it's an archaic word and does not include what in English we consider positive emotions from the era of the quill. You don't need this. Our discussion led to the conclusion that at present there is no widely used Tibetan word that directly translates the meaning of the English word emotion. However, the Tibetan language contains words for the various emotions spoken of in Western languages, anger. The lack of a term and concept for emotion piqued my interest because those of us in the West continually talk about our emotions. I imagine what it would be like to grow up in a culture that wasn't focused on my emotions. An English dictionary defines emotion as a strong feeling about somebody or something. The word feeling in Sanskrit Vedana is also vague and is already used in Buddhist translations to indicate the aggregate of pleasant, happy, unpleasant, unhappy, and painful, or neutral experience. It's also feeling in the Buddhist canon is only pleasure, pain, and neutral. That's it. They don't go into a feeling of dread, a feeling of remorse. They don't discuss it that way. That's the way they work it. They still are happy. This aggregate does not include the word, what we would call feeling in English, such as anger or love. Feeling of love is not as pleasant. The Sanskrit word klesa is a commonly used word in Buddhist texts that refers to mental factors that afflict the mind and do not allow it to abide peacefully. Something that disturbs the mind is a klesa. Okay, it's a good way of defining it. These disturbing emotions and views enslave the mind, confining it to a narrow perspective and motivate actions that hinder the happiness of both ourselves and others. As such, klesa, plural, are the obscurations on the path to liberation, and Buddhist texts speak of their disadvantages and the antidotes to them. That's where the focus is. However, there's no English equivalent to the word klesa that encompasses mental factors as diverse as emotions, attitudes, philosophical views, and innate unquestioned assumptions about ourselves and the world. For the sake of simplicity, in this series we translate klesa as afflictions. See, I have a screen here now that says block, allow app. You got that? Time out, folks. There's something up on my screens. Right here. This came up.
That's don't worry. Sorry, it's a virus screen.
Oh, it's a virus. A virus protector. Okay. A virus protector has shown up. We must have meditated strongly. Affliction is klesa, okay? That's all you have to think. And sometimes expand it and say disturbing emotions and wrong views. Some afflictions, such as the view of personal identity, are called views in English, while others, for example, anger and jealousy, are called emotions. No problem. Mental states, such as not believing that awakening is possible, are called views. A wrong view, we would say. A little sticky, but it might help you. It's two more paragraphs. All people have the same types of emotion and similar attitudes and views about the way they and the world exist. Everybody has an opinion, right? Some of which are conducive for long-term happiness and peace, others of which are hindrances. However, the words we use to speak of them and the concepts that influence how we relate to them vary. Similarly, the behaviors motivated by certain emotions will be socially acceptable in some cultures, but not in others. For example, sticking out our tongue, which is a sign of friendliness and respect in Tibetan cultures, is discouraged in Western cultures, while clapping our hands, a sign of being pleased in Western cultures, indicates aversion in Tibetan culture. You clap for someone, oh, they hated it. I remember I went with Nicky when he was a new monk in Dharamsala, and people were actually sticking out their tongue at him. I thought it was hilarious, but that's what they do. The full mountain. Anyway, no harm, no foul. The words used to label emotions have many nuances. In addition, there may not always be an exact correspondence in meaning between the Sanskrit or Tibetan word and the English term used to translate it. When reading Buddhist works in English, we must take care not to impute the ordinary meaning of the word onto a term that has a specific meaning in the Buddhist context. This you'll hear up and down the block. Very important. The words, when we use certain words in Buddhism, they sometimes have a very specific meaning, not the general societal meaning, which can cause you to get confused. So we'll leave it at that and switch to our friend and yours, the wonderful Guy Newland. Why? Because we're in the inside section of the Lambda, and rather than wading through the weeds right now, prior to Thanksgiving holiday, when we'll all have our minds on what we're going to eat, maybe, or time off, or whatever, or stress with the family. We're in the chapters where we're examining conventional reality and ultimate reality. You heard this up and down the block constantly. Oops, the pen just disappeared. Get out of here. The difference between conventional and ultimate is what we're going to talk about here. Let's see. What does it mean to exist? First of all, we'll start with that. When someone says in Buddhism exists, it means exists conventionally. That's all. Nothing more than that, without getting torn up about it. If it exists, to exist is to exist conventionally. So conventional existence on page 48 of this wonderful book, A Short Introduction to Emptiness, has everything you need in it to get started. Friends, Guy Newland, there's a PDF of it online, but he's well quoted, he's very well studied, and he's a practitioner. Page 48, conventional existence. What is it? Tsongkhapa thus explains that Madhyamaka refutes intrinsic existence, but follows worldly convention, accepting the mere existence of tables and chairs and people. This raises the question, does it not seem that what we think of as worldly convention enshrines some things that are actually wrong? What about the notion of a divine creator who oversees the affairs of the world and the dispensation of justice? In refuting such views, Buddhist philosophers use rational analysis and arguments. From this, according to Tsongkhapa, many Tibetan philosophers concluded that persons and tables have the same nature as the divine creator because both are refuted by analysis and yet sustained in the conventional beliefs of many ordinary people. First, they're totally confused. Convention is fine. We use it all the time. Tsongkhapa used it. Buddha used it. Everybody used it. Relax. Don't go crazy. But when you overthink this, you start, there's no such thing. Conventional is just an illusion, and really sheer void is what's reality. No. So he'll explain nicely. Such Tibetan philosophers cannot accept even the conventional existence of a person or a car, for they think that to do so would entail accepting all the other conventions known in the world, including the convention of a created God. Well, some things are not, and some things are. Let it loose. They believe that to deny the conventional existence of constructs such as a divine creator commits them also to denying the conventional existence of chariots and persons or cars and persons or whatever. As a result, they have no way to make any conventional distinctions on their own behalf. They hold that all distinctions are made by ignorance and are sometimes compassionately tolerated by the philosopher as a concession to the ignorant. Well, we know that the void is the true reality, but these people, so we'll let them have their fun. That's a totally wrong position. They went overboard. And it's a popular position over the years. And some people today might fall into that rut if you don't look deeply. For instance, people think we see conventional existence, we don't see the ultimate. No, we see inherent existence. And that's the problem. If we saw conventional existence, it would imply that we already see the ultimate. We have something to balance it with. So be careful. We see inherent existence, and that causes all the trouble we have. I was going to say crap, but I said anyway. Think about it. It'll be repeated endlessly. You'll get tired. For their own part, they claim neither to identify nor to assert any phenomena. No. In the context of such an understanding, meditating on emptiness means to stabilize the mind without apprehending anything at all. The old void, the old blankness. Yeah. The blank void. There's a void that allows for things. The blank void. Tsongkhapa strongly and repeatedly disagrees with this sort of approach, which he regards as a grievous and nihilistic deviation from the Buddhist philosophical middle way. This is key, subtle, and important. It's very good for your well-being when you start thinking properly here. You'll relax more. He argues that Madhyamaka philosophers have to be able to make conventional distinctions and to explain how the world works at the conventional level while using reason to refute even the conventional existence of constructs such as a creator God. Now, if you're someone who believes in a creator God, run with it. Don't worry about it. Later on, it helps you behave properly. It helps you develop compassion. A temporary fix, it's fine. Not against it. That was a beard, I don't know. So, Tsongkhapa's great treatise lays out 3 criteria for saying that something exists conventionally, right? A conventional consciousness knows about it, things we know about. No other conventional valid cognition contradicts it as being as it is, thus known. In other words, the old thing, the mirage in the water. No, there's some water over there. And somebody said, no, that's a mirage. No, nobody was investigating the ultimate nature of what was being seen. No, they're just saying, what is it to sort it out? What is it in conventional terms? No, you made a wrong mistake. And third, the reason actually analyzes its final realities. That is, analyzes something, whether something intrinsically exists, is that a famous word again, does not contradict it. Since nothing exists ultimately, whatever fails to meet these criteria for existing conventionally does not exist at all. The first criterion of conventional existence is that conventional consciousness must know about it. Everyone knows about it. Tsongkhapa tells us that he's going to make it very easy now. He just gave you the theory. Now he's going to flesh it out nicely. Sankapa tells us that, in a sense, all conventional consciousness operate in a non-inquisitive manner. We don't look into the reality, the mode of being of the glass of water, or the fire alarm, or whatever. Just, it is what it is. We operate in a non-inquisitive manner in daily life. To some degree, they function within the context of how something appears to them. It appears that way, fine. Without asking, is this how the object really exists? Or does it just appear this way to the mind? I'm waiting for this train. It finally comes. Is this the way the train really exists? No, get on the train, silly. Things like that, okay? At the same time, and vitally, Sankapa points out that conventional consciousness need not be utterly non-inquisitive. That means you just, no. You do inquire about things within a context. They operate within the context of how things appear. But within that context, they can do analysis. It appears this way. Yeah, I know it appears inherently existence, but it doesn't. But in the meantime, we're dealing with things. Within that context, they can do analysis. In other words, they can analyze questions like, is this a good car to drive? Is this action a good one to do? Should I marry this person? You better do the due diligence there. This analysis can be quite deep, as long as it is stops short of questioning the mode of being or ontological status. How it be, ontological status. In other words, it does not ask the question, what is a car really? It's a car, shut up, pay your insurance. That's all. So there's a certain way we have to not, ways when we start delving into the mode of being of a thing, which we have to do to relieve our suffering. But in the meantime, Chandrakirti says, you and the world fight over it, whatever wins, and I know the world is going to win. Yes, conventionalities are valid up and down the block. Everyone has this kind of ordinary analytical consciousness. We may sometimes ask philosophical questions like, is conventional knowledge really accurate? Or does this object exist in this way in reality? Nevertheless, we cannot think this way all the time. We have to make mundane distinctions about the time of day, what is and is not edible, and the weather and so forth. Yeah, we also have to make other analytical distinctions that are highly specialized to our professions. So Sankapa reminds us that conventional knowledge is not only what is accepted by the non-philosophical village elders, etc. Conventional knowledge is something that advanced practitioners and sophisticated philosophers also must have and must rely upon. It's very simple. Don't over-inquire. Let it go. Conventional knowledge is evident on every side of every philosophical argument. It shows up, for instance, in the examples that we use to make arguments with one another. It is the perceptual and experiential basis for all our languages. So we agreed on naming this thing, convene on the meaning, conventional. However, as long as Sankapa's latter two criteria for conventional existence make clear, some things that conventional consciousness seems to know about are in fact non-existent. Give us an example. Okay, here it is. That is, careful analysis and accurate perception, even at the conventional level, can show that what some persons or consciousnesses take for a fact is actually completely wrong. For example, clear it up with an example. An ordinary conventional consciousness might mistake a rope for a snake or a mirage for water. Remember the rope and the snake? Oh well. Yes, but another conventional consciousness, no, that's not water. It's a mirage. Look carefully, try to find it somewhere else. One does not have to analyze emptiness in order to refute these mistaken conceptions and perceptions. No. Go to the spot, there's no water, that's it. You're done. Belief in a flat earth and other hypotheses refuted by science all fall into the same category. There were some Tibetan contemporaries that actually believed in a flat earth over and over, and they couldn't convince them, the ones that, but they still had realizations, so I don't know. There are other things that seem to be a matter of ordinary conventional experience and which accurate conventional knowledge does not contradict, but are nonetheless wrong. As Sankapa puts it, there are things that have been apparently known to the world from beginningless time and yet do not exist even conventionally, inasmuch as reason contradicts them. As examples, again, good old examples, one can cite the misconception and misperception that things have an essential nature, or, more simply, the idea of yesterday's mountain is the same as today's mountain. Well, yeah, it's the same way. I went there today. Technically not, if you really look. We're not looking at the ontological status of the mountain, but one of its characteristics is that it changes moment by moment. Everything does. Everything's solid that we see, moment by moment. It was created by a cause. If it was created by a cause, you could take this to the bank. It recreates itself moment by moment. It has within it the seeds of its own destruction. It is impermanent. Created by a cause equals impermanent. I'm sure they argue about this in monasteries, etc., but I'm not privileged to this. But this is accepted by everyone. You have to really dig in a little to say, yes, it looks like the same, but really not. So, a good example there. Only analysis of how things really exist allows these ideas to be refuted. Yet they are refuted, and thus they do not even exist conventionally. There's no such thing as a conventional permanent mountain. There's a mountain changing moment by moment. You and I are changing moment by moment. We're here, on and on. The blackboard, whatever. So that thus is not the case that Madhyamikas accept everything that ordinarily seems to be common knowledge in the world. Most of it, but not everything. They do. So you have to be careful with the tool you're using to analyze things. On the other hand, Tsongkhapa accepts the conventional reality of cars and tables and people that appear as objects of ordinary, healthy consciousnesses. Minds that have not been fooled or distorted by factors such as disease, optical illusions, bad philosophy, and so forth. He argues, as we have seen, that all reasoned analysis can and must proceed from this basic set of accurate and reliable data. Even though the senses mistakenly present images of cars and tables that appear as though they were objectively independent and essentially or intrinsically real, they do allow us to accurately distinguish between a car and a table. Two kinds of analysis. Don't use one when you're supposed to use the other. With further analysis at the conventional level, we can even learn which tables to sit on, if any, and which cars, if any, are good to drive. Sit at, they should say. Why do they put sit on? Nobody sits on the table. Sit at it. Well, somebody must. Anyway, that's his point on this topic. Why am I bringing this up? Because we're going to talk about refuting conventional reality in the next chapter in the Lam Rim. The problem is people use ultimate analysis that does one thing only. It looks for intrinsic existence. That's all it's doing. You don't use that to say, well, this bottle of water or this table or whatever isn't there because when I look intrinsically, there's no intrinsic existence. So that means it doesn't exist. No intrinsic existence doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It exists conventionally. Sometimes people have, when they meditate carefully with logic and then they have direct realization, the meditator, the object they were looking at, the basis of the emptiness, they're trying to find out, what really is, what's its mode of being. It all blends into one. Sometimes they use the word void. I don't like that, but I don't have the experience, so I have to accept what people. So they mistakenly think, well, that's the real reality. The rest of this stuff, this is a fake dream. It's all ignorance. Some high lamas think that over the years. The arguments are flying back and forth. Gladly, I'm not part of them. I'm trying to learn this. But that's why we introduced this little topic tonight. Because when we start wading into the Lam Rim again, tomorrow night, for instance, second part of tomorrow night, we'll see how the points that we made tonight there, and make it easier for us to understand the chapter, because it's written in a wordy manner. It's written philosophically. It's a little tough. So let us see for whom we will pray for. We have one on the board here. I won't move the Rosalind Carter. Gabrielle Berm, B-E-R. Oh, Boehm, B-O-E. B-O-E-H-M. Everyone's suffering in Israel and Gaza, and we can go on. Yeah, horrible. Again, what caused all of that? A wrong mind, a wrong conception of reality. I'm sorry. It starts with the mind. It looks like the mind is nothing compared to these weapons, etc. The mind is your best weapon. I don't have the copy here of this. What is this? The 3 Jewels copy? What? And Adam Johnson, Johnson. Okay. So I got it finally. Stuck. I prostrate to the omniscient one. Thus the Buddha Bhagava, Tathagata Arahat Samyak Sang Buddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the charioteer of tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of devas and humans, is the Buddha Bhagavat. The Tathagata is in accord with all merit. He does not waste the roots of virtue. He's completely ornamented with all patience. He's the basis of the treasures of merit. He is adorned with the minor marks. He blossoms with the flowers of the major marks. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him, he is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who long with faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strengths cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the father of bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the guide of those who journey to the city of nirvana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. He possesses inconceivable confidence. His speech is completely pure. His melody is pleasing. One never has enough of seeing him. His form is incomparable. He's not stained by the realm of desire. He's not stained by the realm of form. He's not affected by the formless realm. He's completely liberated from suffering. He's completely and utterly liberated from the skandhas. He is not possessed with dhatus. His ayatanas are controlled. He has completely cut the knots. He is completely liberated from extreme torment. He is liberated from craving. He has crossed over the river. He is perfected in all the wisdoms. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavats, who arise in the past, present, and future. He does not abide in nirvana. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells on the bhumi where he sees all sentient beings. All these are the perfect virtues, the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. The Holy Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent. Its words are excellent. It is uncorrupted. It is completely perfect and completely pure. It completely purifies. The Bhagavat teaches the Dharma well. It brings complete vision. It is free from sickness. It is always timely. It directs one further. Seeing it fulfills one's purpose. It brings discriminating insight for the wise. The Dharma, which is taught by the Bhagavat, is revealed properly in the Vinaya. It is renunciation. It causes one to arrive at perfect enlightenment. It is without contradiction. It is pithy. It is trustworthy and puts an end to the journey. As for the Sangha of the Great Yana, they enter completely. They enter insightfully. They enter straightforwardly. They enter harmoniously. They are worthy of veneration with joined palms. They are worthy of receiving prostration. They are a field of glorious merit. They are completely capable of receiving all gifts. They are an object of generosity. They are a great object of complete generosity. The protector who possesses great kindness, the omniscient teacher, the basis of oceans of merit and virtue, I prostrate to the Tathagata. Pure, the cause of freedom from passion, virtuous, liberating from the lower realms. This alone is the supreme ultimate truth. I prostrate to the Dharma, which is peace. Having been liberated, they show the path to liberation. They are fully dedicated to the disciplines. They are a holy field of merit and possess virtue. I prostrate to the Sangha. I prostrate to the Buddha, the leader. I prostrate to the Dharma, the protector. I prostrate to the Sangha, the community. I prostrate respectfully and always to these three. The Buddha's virtues are inconceivable. The Dharma's virtues are inconceivable. The Sangha's virtues are inconceivable. Having faith in these inconceivables, therefore the fruitions are inconceivable. May they be born in a completely pure realm. Yes. So our next presentation will be tomorrow night from the parsonage in South Orange, and we'll be on the web also, Facebook, YouTube, what else? 3 places, Facebook, YouTube, and the Tibet Center website, of course, where everything exists. That's used, everything conventionally exists. Anyway, thank you very much for your patience. Big love to all of you.